A double homicide unsolved for a decade, followed by a third murder. Was this trio of death the work of a single killer?
The victim's blood was probably on the hammer. The killer was swinging it. He was casting the blood up on the ceiling and on the wall.
They were not considered to have been killed by a stranger because there was no break-in.
The case was pretty straightforward, so why did it all of a sudden go in a different direction?
I remember telling the lieutenant, this ain't good. Did we miss something? Did we overlook something? Should we have taken this strategy?
They didn't have physical evidence, they didn't have eyewitnesses, and if Detective Herman hadn't stayed with it, who knows what would have happened.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Cobb County, Georgia. Part of the Atlanta metropolitan region, this fast-growing suburb was an unlikely backdrop for 3 homicides that occurred over a 10-year period. A patchwork of strange clues guided investigators to a shocking conclusion. The killer had been right in front of them since the very beginning. On a warm summer night in June, 46-year-old Carol Marlin and her friend Maggie Ginn went out on the town.
They made a regular Thursday night get-together. They went out to eat someplace. And so they maintained their friendship, and that says that there was something deep and abiding in their relationship that you just don't see very often.
All seemed well, but later that night, the local 911 dispatcher received a call from Carol's husband, John Peak. It was very late. Carol hadn't made it home, and he was worried about her. The next day, police knocked on the door at Maggie's house. No one answered.
Could not get a response. If you dialed Maggie's phone number from the driveway, I did a couple of times, you could hear the phone ringing inside the house.
And what was your gut feeling at that point?
Either something bad has happened in that house, or those 2 ladies stayed out late and were sleeping in, which to me didn't make sense.
So then you needed to get inside of Maggie's house to find out what was going on.
With the help of a neighbor, I got her daughter on the phone, and she said, hey, if my mom's vehicle's in the carport, then she's home.
Detective Herman checked the carport. Maggie's vehicle was there.
I told her, I said, we're gonna go in, and she said, yes, please.
It looked as if Carol Marlin and Maggie Ginn had interrupted a burglary in progress.
It's pitch black inside. Shined the flashlight across from the kitchen area onto the dining room floor, and I could see the body of a female laying on the floor, face down.
Both women had been bludgeoned to death with some sort of hard weapon.
Carol Marlin had been savagely beaten in the head. Maggie Ginn had a couple of injuries to the side of the head, so bad that the blood was transferring to the weapon that was used, and then when the killer was swinging it, he was casting the blood and brain matter up on the ceiling and on the wall.
Carol was sprawled on the floor of the dining room while Maggie lay dead in the bedroom. As the police examined the carnage, one thing was obvious.
They were not considered to have been killed by a stranger because there was no break-in, and the ransacking of the house did not look like a robbery.
The killer had even locked the front door, and clutched in Carol's hand was an invoice with a name on it, Barry Webb.
Crime scene tech got the paper, and it was a torn piece of invoice from Lockheed Martin, where she used to work.
A major defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, had a division located in Marietta, Georgia. Coincidentally, the 2 victims, Carol's husband, John Peak, and the mysterious Barry Webb, had all worked there.
You know, all of them used to socialize together, parties, holidays, but then they stopped.
So what changed? Seeking answers, Cobb County detectives dropped in on the Lockheed Martin company, where the staff immediately jumped into action.
To HR, they took all the information down, security got involved and began to track as much as they could.
Investigators learned that someone had sent written death threats to Carol Marlin just 10 days before she was killed.
It had been very troubling to Carol to receive these letters. She found something on her computer, something was in her office mailbox.
What did these letters say?
I'm going to kill you. These things are wrong and we're going to take care of it.
But Carol wasn't the only recipient of hate mail at the company.
5 people got a letter sort of vaguely threatening them about positions, and it did sort of stir the office up because certainly they were not used to having people killed.
Meanwhile, Carol's relatives contributed everything they could to the probe into her death.
Casey Peak's family were just absolutely committed. They went through thousands, maybe tens of thousands, I don't know how many pages of documents, when they were trying to find something, anything that they could use and give to the detectives.
Unfortunately, even the most thorough investigation can turn up more questions than answers. John Peak, Carol's husband, had reported her missing, but did he have something to do with her disappearance? And how was Barry Webb connected to the killings?
Before they were able to get in touch with him, they found out that he had reported a break-in at his house.
The lives of 2 longtime friends ended in the most savage of ways. A bewildered husband was left searching for his wife, and the name of a mystery man appeared on a document left at the scene of the crime.
They identified the name on the piece of paper as another person from Lockheed, and then they went to investigate him.
Barry Webb had been friends with both victims, Carol Marlin and Maggie Ginn, as well as Carol's husband, John Peak. But for some reason, the group fractured at some point, and the 4 Lockheed employees went their separate ways.
There might be something going on here. A lot of times, folks don't want to level out with the police, tell us everything.
But it turned out that Barry Webb had something very important to tell you.
Barry Webb calls me, and he says, I was watching the news. I know those ladies. I know John Peak.
On the night that Carol and Maggie were slaughtered, an unwanted visitor broke into the home of Barry Webb. Police say it was John Peak, Carol's husband.
Yeah, he says, I was at home, and I heard something in the basement. I went downstairs. I know John. I confronted him. And I said, what are you doing in my house? And Peak said something to the effect, well, I thought Carol was here.
The 2 men faced off in the basement.
I'm telling you, can't make it up. Barry Webb had an interest in this female, another female. John Peak had also developed an interest in her. So there were dueling interests.
In the end, John Peak would apologize for his behavior and head home.
John admitted breaking into the house. He said, I don't know what I was thinking, I was sure they were having an affair and I just wanted to catch them.
Detectives say Barry Webb denied any relationship with Carol Marlin, romantic, sexual, or otherwise. He decided not to file charges against John Peak for the break-in, but police say the anger between the 2 men stayed hot.
He had a really good relationship with this guy before that, so it really didn't make any sense. Nobody knew that they were on the outs for any reason. So I guess that was part of the head-scratching evidence.
The police asked for writing samples from both John Peak and Barry Webb. Neither man's handwriting matched anything scrawled on the invoice found in Carol's hand. Meanwhile, the murder weapon remained missing. Detectives pursued the angle of the jealous husband, theorizing that John Peak wanted to frame Barry Webb for Carol's murder. And police say this was possible because John Peak had been carrying a bag when he broke into Barry Webb's basement.
John Peak's got a gym-type bag. And Barry Webb told us I could hear some metal clanging, and it fell to the floor, and Peak was able to get away.
Police theorized if John Peak had killed his wife over her perceived affair and wanted to put Barry Webb in the crosshairs, that it would have been easy for him to drop the murder weapon at Barry's house and take off.
I believe that it was probably a claw hammer, and the victim's blood was probably on the hammer, which was in the bag.
In another strange coincidence, just prior to her murder, Carol Marlin had switched the main beneficiary of her life insurance policy from her mother to her husband. John Peak stood to collect $700,000. Peak certainly appeared to be the man the police were looking for, but without a witness, without DNA evidence, without anything to tie him directly to the murders, police say John Peak was free to roam the streets.
Authorities were telling us that the husband did it. They just couldn't prove it.
Faced with a weak case, the district attorney balked at going to court.
There was some disagreements on whether or not we should move it forward.
I covered a lot of crime over my career, and there were very few that were actually totally circumstantial cases, which both of these murders were.
And so nothing happened. No one was arrested, no one was charged, and nearly 10 years would elapse before the Cobb County Police could restart this case and maybe, just maybe, snap the handcuffs on a murderer.
Detective Herman was one of the most dogged detectives I ever covered. He was absolutely committed to his cases.
"10 miles northwest of Atlanta, Georgia, police responded to an apparent burglary that turned out to be a cold-blooded homicide. A middle-aged woman had been executed, shot in the back, as she slept in her bedroom. The weapon, a .30 caliber rifle. While the method of killing was horrific, what was interesting about this additional murder was the name of the victim's husband.
Running 911.
Yes, this is John Peak.
Okay, what's going on?
I just found my wife dead.
Except this time, the murder victim wasn't Carol Marlin, the first wife of John Peak. This time it's 9 years later, and the murder victim was John Peak's new wife, Casey Peak. What were the chances that John Peak had lost two of his wives to crazed killers? During the years between the two murders, John Peak seemed none the worse for wear. He married Casey and moved on from his past.
The guy liked to live large and enjoyed fine things. When he and Casey got together, they built a big house and they traveled a lot. They seemed to enjoy being with other couples.
At the same time, the police were forced to watch from the sidelines as a suspected murderer lived a carefree life.
It had been a long and very frustrating 9 years for me working on this case, realizing or thinking maybe, hey, is there something we missed?
But now investigators had a second chance at nailing John Peak to the wall, and some help was on its way from the family of his second dead wife, Casey.
Her brother and sister were keeping the case going. They wanted to make sure that somebody got convicted. They filed a civil suit, so they were getting things that the detectives were not able to get with warrants.
John and Casey were estranged at the time of her murder. When you brought John Peak in for an interview, did he provide you with any information or just try to hustle you?
Peak reported that because he had not been able to get in touch with her. That his demeanor was very stoic, very matter of fact.
I rang the doorbell, no answer. Knocked on it, no answer. So I went around back.
Y'all still married?
Yes, we are.
And that was her condo?
That's her condo.
You didn't seem convinced though, true?
He would try to come up with some emotion, try to force himself to cry, but it was all fake.
The right door was open, so I looked in there, I called her name, I heard a television on, and I felt a chill go through my body at the time. And I walked back there, and she was very still, and I touched her leg, and I knew she was dead.
With this decade-old case now reinvigorated, detectives had a new challenge: how to connect the three murders to one man, John Peak.
It was decided that we would use the cases against each other, so to speak.
One question comes into mind when reviewing the first murder. Why did he kill Maggie in addition to his wife, Carol?
Maggie, again, in effect, she was collateral damage, to make it appear as something that it was not.
Both crime scenes were staged to look like attempted home invasions, but police quickly dismissed burglary as a motive. Detectives say the real reason that John Peak executed his two wives is as old as time. He wanted their life insurance payouts.
The bottom line on these murders was money. It was financial. He didn't want to be with either woman.
And apparently he also wasn't a faithful husband. Detectives say while he was supposedly patching things up with his wife Casey, that John Peak was enjoying a relationship with another woman, a girlfriend who came forward, visited the police, and filled in the details.
That's very dicey kind of situation, pretty gamey there, because you got a wife who is in her condo and you're dating her once, maybe twice a week. Then you've got a girlfriend that is living in the house with you.
It was amazing to me, this effect that he had on these ladies.
John Peak's days of playing Casanova looked as if they were over. Even so, after police arrested him and locked him up, Peak doubled down on his intricate game of chess.
He really started cranking it up. He was trying to set up alibis. There were inmates in the jail that were contacting us, telling us, hey, he's offered me a certain amount of money if I'll reach out to a friend of mine and say, hey, they were in the neighborhood.
While professing his innocence, prosecutors say Peak desperately tried to manipulate whoever would listen to him.
He was communicating with his brother. He was trying to corrupt everybody on the outside, his own family, friends, to set up to help him. And all the time we were listening to his phone calls from the jail.
While Peak played games from behind bars, the district attorney's office built its case against him. 2 years later, with John Peak headed for trial, the prosecutor rang up the lead investigator with an interesting request.
He called me and said, hey, can you be at the courthouse Thursday morning? Peak's gonna plead guilty. And I was floored, because to me, that wasn't his style. I never would have expected this.
Prosecutors say when confronted with evidence of his jailhouse phone calls and his lust for the insurance money from his dead wives, John Peak threw in the towel. He admitted to killing all 3 women, but he was tight-lipped about everything else.
There were minimal details. Peak admitted to doing it, would not provide any details.
For bludgeoning Carol Marlin and Maggie Ginn, John Peak accepted a plea deal. As part of that deal, he also admitted to killing Casey Peak, his second wife. He was sent to prison for life. The patience and determination of the detectives on this case scuttled any of Peak's future plans involving murder for money.
People tend to repeat patterns over and over again. Who knows, he could have been doing this even today if he hadn't been caught.
And he would have killed again, without a doubt.
It took 11 years, but investigators finally blocked John Peak from ever again solving his marital problems with the end of a hammer or rifle. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. If your spouse is pressuring you regarding a will or to be the recipient of a life insurance policy and your relationship is volatile, be wary. And if they already are the benefactor, and if you are in the process of a divorce, safety experts recommend that you remove your spouse as the recipient. After you have done so, make them aware of the change to help protect your financial and physical safety. For local resources, risk assessment tools, and safety planning guides, go to womenslaw.org. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.